It's hard to believe that 50 years ago last week, I loaded my family up and moved to Sweetwater, Texas to start a company. I must have only been about 3 years old. Honestly, 29. 2 kids in diapers. Kathy was 6, Larry was 4. I don't think I could do that now. Must have been arrogance without equal. We picked Sweetwater. I came down about 2 weeks earlier, toured West Texas. Spent the first night in Big Springs. Horrid. Blue Norther came in, froze up the city water. No water, no coffee, no bathroom in Big Springs. Got in a car on the way to Abilene. Stopped in Sweetwater to get a cup of coffee and go to the bathroom. 3 guys were in a restaurant, Stars, talking about the fishing they just did and how good it was. That got my dad's attention. While we were here, we thought we'd just look around a little bit. Went on and interviewed Abilene, Waco, San Angelo, Brownwood. Finalists, believe it or not, were Cleburne and Mineral Wells. And we looked real hard at those 2, and then we came back and looked at Sweetwater, and we found a good city, had a small population, a very supportive bank, nice people, lots of empty buildings, very low-cost buildings, and a lot of labor force left over from the previous manufacturers. It had a Gulf Oil refinery here, an International Harvester thing, and that was our selection. Also, they had very good schools. At that time, it was a big issue of dumbing down schools, especially high school, where you didn't have to take hard courses, main thing, just go to school. That hadn't happened in Sweetwater yet. It did happen, unfortunately, about 15 years later, but at that time, it was still a good school. So we started the business. I worked for Howard Everline at Everline Instrument Division of Reynolds in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I basically designed an instrument that they sold to the Air Force, and they made a lot of profit, horrendous profit. Of course, it caused all kinds of chaos in the company later because of 90% marginal tax rates, not enough money to pay taxes. But anyway, Howard and I had a disagreement. He wanted to seek more big jobs. I wanted to serve the basic health physics industry. And I was looking primarily at that time, it was a quite small market. Figured that was the market of the future. The first thing I had to have was an instrument, and we introduced our first instrument, which was just a basic counter with multiple probes for different radiation, which now is called a Model 3. I wanted to call it Model 1, and my sales guy argued that no, people think you just started, let's call it a Model 11. Okay, we'll call it a Model 11. It was 11 in classic numerical method, so most people called it a Model 2 when they saw it. As it refined, we relabeled it Model 3. And we tried to keep the basic functions the same so people that are trained with it can have an updated model but not have to be retrained. And that was the beginning. That took a year. By the end of the year, I was out of money, and we did anything we could, so I did inventions for hire. And amazing how many people invented things, but basically what they had was an idea and they needed someone to figure out how to do it. So I would do it for them, build their model, and they'd go to their patent attorneys and try to get patents. That was the beginning. We had to be in business for 2 years before any major customer would work with us. And our first sale was to Val Johnson, to Rocky Flats. He bought 10 instruments. That was an exciting time. I ran around the block a couple times when I got the order. That instrument was $3,500 for that order. I think you could buy the same set of instruments much better now for about $4,500. But anyway, that was the first order. 2 years and 2 weeks after we introduced our instruments, Los Alamos bought 200 instruments. And in those days, what we do is we would bring in people when we had the contract, and they were all part-time, most of them were housewives. And if they were lucky, it would happen in the fall when their kids were in school and they'd get their Christmas money, and by then we'd have it shipped and gone. That's what happened in their first contract. And then as we went on, we just kept growing. The interesting thing, though, with the technology, say in the late 60s, we had maybe 30, 35 employees in assembly putting parts together and 2 machinists. Now the ratio is approaching reverse. In other words, advancement in packaging, electronics really made it go. I made some really dumb mistakes. One time I delegated front office responsibility and didn't keep up with it and almost got in trouble. We had a thing that impacted the business. I got an SBA loan, which I thought would really help us, but it turned out SBA is an extremely inflexible organization. And as we grew, we couldn't get our receivables released, so we were really hard pressed for cash until I got large enough that I could get another line of loans to pay them all. And that wasted about 2 years of our time. You know, you had the bank panic, which was kind of a thing. And 9/11 shut down sales for almost 5 months. And then of course they come roaring back, so we kind of got a little bit iffy there, about the 5th month after 9/11. And then of course people still need their product. I mean, they're just kind of locked up. So these are normal things. When we have things like .com bust and the bank school broke, those are always difficult times. So, all in all though, the company's grown well. We've had all the normal ups and downs. We have strategic goals, and one of the thoughts, even when I started this business, is, you know, as businesses go, it's a very tiny market. To us it's big, but you know, in the world scheme of things, it's a very tiny market. And I felt over a long time that the various contributors, the components to the market, probably would have a struggle because of the small market, small customer base. So from day one, we looked at possibly either developing a technology or acquiring companies that have technology for our support products. The basic company basically is an electronic instrument company, and we have to buy the components. We have to buy the phototubes, we have to buy the GM tubes, the plastic scintillators, we have to buy the semiconductors. And of course semiconductors is no problem because that's a massive market, unless the massive market goes away and suddenly we need one, which happens once in a while. But as companies became available, we've acquired them. So we have divisions to make photomolded power tubes. We have a division that makes plastic scintillators. One of the problems in a small manufacturing company is very, very difficult to get short-run molded, plastic molded parts. So we acquired a plastic molding company where we concentrate on short-run parts. Generally, if you want to have something molded, if you want less than 1 million pieces, it's very difficult to get a company to work with you.
Right.
Well, from the time they were tiny, when they got old enough to do anything, I put them to work in the company. So one of the things in developing the company that I never got over is the first company I went to work for was Collins Radio, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And you would drive up and you'd go through security and go in the door, and you'd be in a windowless building all day, and you come out at night and you go through the door and you're back in the world. And when you work, your family had no concept of what went on in that building or where you were, what have you. So one of the things about family in the business, I wanted a family-friendly business where the people could bring their children to work so they could see what they do. And actually, when they're in school, you know, they need a little job. Do we have little jobs? Let them work. Find out what work's like. I applied that with my own children. So all the children, when they were in school, worked in the company one way or the other. The biggest problem I had is the bosses need to be their bosses rather than treat them in a special way. So I'd have to find the right guy for them to work for who wasn't afraid to talk back to me. But anyway, that's family. So we do have family people involved. Right now, my son Larry Ludlum is actually the boss. I still have the title, but he's actually the boss. I have one daughter that's the company chaplain, that's Kathy Reed. We have very specific rules for owner Ludlum family members. One is no one in the family can be in the front office with accounting, because we do a lot of bank work, and that's just no issue there at all. It's strictly professional, and never a problem with the banker. The other is that for a family member working gun, they have to be a professional. In other words, it's very difficult to have a family member, say, be a machinist who reports to a guy 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 who reports to me, because one of those people are going to be very conscious of whether this guy ought to be fired or killed. So we just say you've got to be a professional. What basically that means is you've got to have a degree or equivalent knowledge. You don't have to agree if you can accomplish, but if you like if you were a shop manager for another company, then if we had an opening for a shop manager, we would consider that a family member, but not other than in school. I mean, when they're in school, they ain't working anywhere in the company. But once they're grown up, then they have to be on their own. There are many families in this company, Bellingers. I think all the Bellingers except one, Troy, I think all the rest of them work at the company, and 3 of them still do. We have quite a few people who have family members, father and son, father, wife and son, son-in-laws. So we always try to avoid conflicts. We've got to be able to let them go, so family or not. I incidentally fired Larry over the history of time 3 times. He's quit more than once too. It's extremely important. The biggest exposure to radiation, of course, is medical. The second biggest exposure to radiation is normal environmental stuff like potassium. A big source of contamination in your body with radiation, of course, is marijuana, which is high potassium content, meat. All these things are what's called radiation. Anything brought out of the ground has radioactivity in it. One of the biggest contributors to radiation is called norm. This is normal occurring radioactivity, and primarily this occurs in scrap yards. And you might have pipes that came out of a refinery or an oil well where the oil is running that pipe for years, and it's accumulated radium, and so it's very radioactive. It's not dangerously radioactive, but measurably radioactive. And you want to keep that out of scrap so you don't get it in steel and wind up spending $30 million cleaning up a steel mill. So that's a large market, which is radiation. But and then there will be, and there have been, radiation incidents. And that's where radiation detection is extremely important. And so radiation detection has been important in that way. And reliable stuff on the shelf ready to go is very important, because you never know when you're going to have an incident. Who would have believed that you have a 100-foot tidal wave in a Japanese shore? I mean, that's one of those things once in every 1,000 years maybe. But those things happen, and they'll happen again. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.
All right.